I'm Aria Schwartz.
And I'm Rachel Galligan.
Welcome to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. Power rankings. It might be the preseason, but that doesn't mean we can't formulate early rankings. Let's get into it. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. You're looking for tickets for the upcoming WNBA season? Thanks to our sponsors TickPick, you don't have to worry. The original no-fee ticket site and official ticketing partner of the WNBA champion, Chicago Sky. Use the link tickpick.com/WINSIDR. That's tickpick.com/Winsidr for all your upcoming ticket purchases for the WNBA, NFL, NBA, or any other event. Well, Rachel, we were chatting earlier about power rankings. I know you wrote an article for Just Women's Sports that there was a lot of chatter about doing some early power rankings. The teams they're not set, but I think we've formulated kind of a communal decision on a lot of the rosters. Obviously, some teams have some intriguing questions, but I don't think any of the moves left truly move the needle to a crazy amount. And anyways, even if they do, I do feel like we're at camp. This is when early season power rankings should happen, right? So, Rachel, how's it going? Are you pro power rankings? You anti power rankings? What's going on with you?
It's so funny. This was the first time I've individually done something like this. And I think it's funny you said, I think we've come to a communal consensus. I completely disagree for the amount of backlash I got from some of my power rankings. But, it was the first time I had really done an activity like that. And I was anti it before. I've always kind of been like, it's kind of just whatever for me. But honestly, it was kind of a fun exercise. I think it always, for me, right, it depends what lens you're looking at it from. And certainly was a fun exercise to go through. But I mean, at the end of the day, we haven't even had a chance to have our eyes on these teams. And there's so many unknowns, right? So really, you're going off of the consistent teams from last year and the present knowledge that we have, which is free agency moves, injuries, and just other miscellaneous massive concerns, i.e. Brittany Griner even being available to play for the Phoenix Mercury, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. So, it was definitely an interesting exercise. I've always been the type of person, I don't put a lot of stock in rankings. I think, you take them with a grain of salt, you have fun with it, and you move on. But yeah, definitely still fun to discuss and fun to look back on it, a month down the road towards the end of the season and see kind of how far we've come.
Yeah, I think power rankings, I have many feelings on them. I personally love them because they are an easy, friendly way to start debates about the W, which is a thing that I always stress is something that I feel like we don't do enough of. So I love it because it gives me an opportunity to scream at Rachel, she's wrong, and her to scream back at me, I'm wrong, as the fans clearly have been doing. The really funny part for me is with power rankings, like, you're always defending yourself a couple weeks down the road. Like, when you look back at old power rankings, you always have to have like an asterisk of like, yeah, but this was happening or blah, blah, blah. We're going to get into it. It's extremely interesting. In my mind, power rankings are kind of done in tiers. You have like the teams that are the consensus fighting for the championship. Then you have the teams that are just a step behind. What do they need to do to get to that next tier? Then you have the dangerous but not consistent, like those teams that, they're going to play some great basketball every once in a while, but some games are just not going to show up and their record isn't going to look that great. And then you got the bottom of the barrel teams. I think we know who's already there. Why don't we start off with the top tier? And there's an interesting aspect here because we're discussing the Chicago Sky, the defending champs. I feel like we probably oddly agree on this, which is the Chicago Sky are the defending champs. Therefore, you kind of have to put them number one in the power rankings in the preseason. Do you agree with that?
I think that it was certainly a respect level. For me, when I'm doing rankings, I'm taking into consideration how a team, finished. And combined with their moves, this team, in my opinion, actually got better in the offseason. So it's a level of respect, but also like it's completely possible for this team to go win it all. It's also completely possible for this team to finish eighth, seventh or eighth. I think what's interesting is we talk about some of these other ones at the top. Like we've had years in the past where we feel like, oh my God, like the Seattle Storm are unbelievable. No one's going to touch them. And that very well could be the case this year. They're basically bringing it back. Knock on wood, everybody's healthy, everybody's returning. Same thing with the Connecticut Sun. So, I mean, I think for you and I, we probably agree on all those three. But I think for me, if you're splitting hairs with those three franchises, mine comes down to a certain level of respect from just the reigning champions, in my opinion.
Oh, I like, here's the thing. If you ask me day one best team, like, I don't think power ranking wise, day one, I don't think I would go with the Sky. But hear me out. I agree with you, and I put them number one because of respect. You have to give that respect. The interesting thing with the Sky is, while I agree with you that they got better with their offseason moves, there are some questions that I have. The real questions that I have is, one, how do you fill two holes, right? There, in my mind, there was two big departures this offseason, Stephanie Dolson and Diamond DeShields. And to make things abundantly simplistic, Stephanie Dolson is a true big. Yeah, she can shoot a little bit, but it's the big size, right? Having somebody who can go toe to toe. I'm not going to say you're going to beat a Sylvia Fowles, a Brittany Griner, or Tiara McCowan. I was going to say Kalani Brown, but can at least serviceably be that size competitor on your side of the ball for those bigger bigs. And then Diamond DeShields is athleticism. I mean, those are the big questions. Now, if you ask me if this team skill-wise got better, I agree. But the contrarian in me has to sit here and go, are we in a situation now of Vegas Aces when they had Liz Cambage and A'ja Wilson? Now, I understand there's a difference, and Rachel, as the expert of the bigs, is probably like jumping out of her seat right now, trying to hit that unmute button as quick as possible to yell at me while I'm wrong. But my point is more so like, no one's going to deny that the Aces roster was more talented when they had Liz Cambage on the roster. That said, I think you and I have always agreed about the fact that the team was never going to win it all with Liz Cambage and A'ja Wilson. The style of play just didn't work. So my question, I guess, is more so like, can the style of play work given that you're trying to make up for the fact that if you look at this roster, I mean, they really don't have that large, imposing big, and they did lose some. Emma Meesseman is not going to run the court like a Diamond DeShields or a Clea Copper. You know what I mean? Like, there are still some question marks, but I agree with you completely. Out of respect, you have to give them the number one, at least until the season tips off.
Well, and like, let's not forget how atrocious Chicago was at times last year, like on that losing streak. And, this was a team that was not dominant. It was not a dominant like Seattle team we've seen from the past. This was a team that peaked at the right time and went on a run during playoffs and won it all. So, if you can carry that momentum over now, like for me, I look at it a little bit differently. I'm replacing Dolson with Meesseman. Okay, so that's a finals MVP player that, we know what Meesseman can do. In my mind, this is not a knock on Dolson, but the skill and just everything that Meesseman brings to the table, you're certainly not getting worse with that transaction. I'm looking at it like that. I think the biggest question mark, with this team is, yes, you lose a player like Diamond DeShields. Obviously, you retain Clea Copper, but Diamond DeShields and kind of that long, highly elite athletic type of guard that can kind of shape shift and do a lot of different things on both ends of the floor. Like, what does that look like? That's what I'm most curious about. That's an opportunity. I think why camp is so competitive with Chicago right now. Like, you've got Kayla Davis, you've got all sorts of players in there that I think there's a serious opportunity here at that position. And then you throw in Julie Alleman, who, is not expected to come until, middle of the summer. But I mean, she's a phenomenal player in my personal opinion. Maybe that's just the international scout in me, but she's going to bring a lot to this team at that time. Maybe it may be potential shot in the arm, but I hear what you're saying. I'm by no means sitting here saying, "Oh my God, Chicago is a no-brainer. They're going to rout everybody this year." I think it's as wide open as it's ever been in terms of those top kind of 4 or 5 teams.
Well, I think to play devil's advocate against myself, I would say that like going into last year, I stressed that I thought Steph Dolson didn't fit the style of play of Chicago, and she was going to be a hamper. She obviously came up with a few big plays late in the season, which kind of made it so I can't complain about her anymore for a few more months. But so, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to pick apart what this team is. But yeah, no, I totally agree. We look at these other teams, these other top teams, Connecticut Sun. What did they do? Well, they went out and they brought Courtney Williams back. They needed a little bit of that swagger, that hype man on the court, that person who is going to lead this team emotionally, because at times when you have so many alphas or so many top tier players, at times everyone wants the shot, but everyone also doesn't want to be that ball hog. We know who the Connecticut Sun are. I mean, Rachel, you can talk about the Connecticut Sun for days upon days. For me, is it like, it's almost, I can see how it's hilarious to say this, but I can see how they're going to try and use the disrespect hashtag again, because you talk about a team that had the MVP, has, some of the top players in the league, were clear and far beyond the number one team in the regular season. Then they sputtered out of control. And yes, the Chicago Sky had a 500 regular season, limped into the playoffs and made a run for it. But at the same respect, like, what, the playoffs was 9 games, 10 games, something like that. You know what I mean? Like the Connecticut Sun have shown they're the number one team in this league. So they have to be on that top tier. Any thoughts on the Sun?
I mean, we have not been able to see the vision of this team at full capacity. I mean, think about it. JJ was out in the bubble a period of time. Then Alyssa Thomas was out. Then Alyssa Thomas comes back at the most bizarre time in the season. And so the vision of kind of this big three of Alyssa Thomas, Jonquel Jones, and DeWanna Bonner has not consistently been able to be on the floor together. Knock on wood, this has been a team that has faced a lot of adversity in terms of just not having that their anchors consistently on the court. So every year there seemed to be kind of something. I mean, as all teams are, but with Connecticut in particular. So I'm really excited for Connecticut to hopefully be at full strength for the majority of the season. You can't deny what Alyssa Thomas brings to this league and how unique of a player she is. Her toughness factor, which seems to trickle down to every other player on this roster. You can't deny, the level that Jonquel Jones is playing at, and hopefully, continues to elevate her play after an MVP season. I think the biggest thing with this team is, you got to talk about Brand January and that loss, because their toughness on the defensive end of the floor, I felt really, really hinged on. It started with January. She was really kind of that 1-2 punch. So you lose January and you bring in Williams, and that was kind of that area, like they had to get more offensively dynamic at kind of that off guard position, and they did. So I mean, I do think January hurts. That sucks, but Courtney Williams, this is a player who's familiar with this team, went through what she went through in Atlanta, probably bringing a different perspective into the franchise and hungry for some success and ready to get after it. And, this is a close-knit team across the board. I feel like, it's now or never with Connecticut. And it feels like we've kind of been saying that for a couple of years. But if you combine the consistency that this team has had within just their style of play and what's being preached for the last few years, with just hopefully the health and talent of this roster, I think you potentially run into the depth issue, which we had talked about before, but we'll see that with a couple teams. But yeah, I mean, shoot, it's like,
Rachel, Connecticut can't have it be a depth issue when Kurt Miller runs 6 players deep. Like, you just, what I mean? Like, I agree with you, but at a certain point, we just need to go, okay, he's found a way to make it work with those players. As long as one, because it's not even like they get injured mid-season, right? They're getting injured in the preseason, so it's, what I mean.
Well, I think you look at this team and you're like, why this should be their year. You know what I'm saying? Like you've put together a veteran, consistent team. You've got you patched up the holes that you felt like you had, and now if everyone can be healthy, like this should be your year. That I would think that would be the mentality that this team is approaching with night in and night out.
They have to. Like
to,
Rachel, you always talk about.
They're ready for that next step, and that's a championship.
Well, they have to be, because you've talked about this a lot, and it's one of those things where like you might have a really talented roster, but at a certain point it gets stale. Like I understand that Alyssa Thomas was injured, Jonquel Jones sat out for a year, Courtney Williams left, and now we're finally all back together. We get DeWanna Bonner, all we're finally all together, and it's the first time we've been all together. But you have to feel like, I don't care if it took 4 years to get this squad to who it was supposed to be. At a certain point, it's like, okay, if it doesn't work this year, like I almost feel like you're just trying to bang your head against the wall and create a flower. That's not a saying, but I just marked it now. You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, like it becomes stale very quickly. Is what it's been sitting on the grocery store shelves for so long. When you take it home, you got 2 days to eat it.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that quote. That's phenomenal.
So let's talk about the Seattle Storm. I mean, a scary team. They've made some additions. Here's my thing with every season in the off season. You can't completely just gain things. You also have to lose some things, right? Seattle Storm. I'm not trying to knock on their Noelle Quinn, their head coach, or their coaching style, or anything like that. But I do want to like be realistic of the fact that like, okay, now this is her first full season as the head coach. I'm excited to see what she can do. It's not the same as a Becky Hammon or a Vanessa Nygaard, but it is a situation of, as talented as this roster is, this is a young, inexperienced, whatever the word is, head coach, and we need to see what that's going to look like, because at the end of the day, a lot of it's going to, and yes, I know you have Sue Bird and Brianna Stewart, some of the greatest basketball players, and Jewel Lloyd, some of the greatest basketball players. At a certain point, it comes down to coaching also. They're going to, what I mean? Like, that's, I guess, my biggest question. Mercedes Russell is going to continue to look better and better. Gabby Williams, when she gets here, is going to look great. Brand January, her defense, like, I guess I don't know what is your question mark for this team?
Yeah, it's hard to put into words, and I feel like you did a pretty good job with it. I mean, obviously, look at this roster. It's run it back one more time. 3.0, 4.0, whatever we want to call it. 5.0. I really, really, really like January on this team. I really like Mercedes Russell, how far her game has evolved. Gabby Williams, I'm very excited to see her back in the league. I think she's been playing extremely well, and she brings an element to this team that they really needed. So for me, yeah, I mean, it's like you have these players who've done it. You have these champions. That you've got the greatest player in the world in Stewie. You've got the greatest point guard in the history of the game in Sue Bird. Like, at this point, is it management? Is it roster management? Is it time management? Is it you have to have a little bit of luck too. And I mean, the biggest difference, is time with this and Noelle Quinn. And I think, you have a really great staff that's been put together. Noelle Quinn, knows how to manage this team, but there's still an element of kind of like after last year, some inconsistency of what is this team? How is everybody right now? How is everyone feeling? How's everyone looking? How's this team meshing on the court under Quinn? It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think we just need to kind of watch this team for a couple weeks and get a feel of like, okay, is this the superpower Seattle Storm team that we know it can be? Or are they going to have kind of some ebbs and flows, like kind of certain times they've looked like? So it's just kind of this feeling, I guess, more than anything. I guess that's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their roster and you see a lot of players that like are at that point of taking that next step, and then players who are either like towards the end of their prime or past their prime, or in the midst of their prime. Like, obviously, yes, you have players throughout the whole range, so now I sound like a ridiculous person. But what I'm trying to say is, like, you have these insanely talented, very young players, and then you have these vets who have already been there, done that. And it's the interesting aspect for them is how are we going to see the growth from these younger, super talented players, and how's that going to mesh, like you were saying, with the older players who are like, hey, let's get Sue Bird one more. I mean, I'm sure the young players think that. Also, let's talk about just a step behind. The next tier, in my mind, it's Lynx, Aces, and Mystics. And I'll tell you why. There's a few teams that maybe some other people would have in there that I don't. These are the teams that there's just a few question marks. And in my mind, simplistic question marks. Also, when you were talking about the Sky and making that great playoff run, it made me think that like Coach T and the Mystics must be so pissed they changed the playoff format. Because if I'm Coach T, and especially after seeing what Elena Deladon did in a few games when she was healthy last year, what she's done in the preseason so far this year, I'm thinking, hey, if our team can stay in the playoff hunt, stay around the 5 seed, 6 seed, and then proceed to add Deladon to the mix late in the season so we don't overwork her or whatever, and then just make a crazy playoff run with that old playoff system, that would be quite lovely right now. They can't do that. My question for this team is, with the growth and, I mean, we talked about this, Rachel. This is essentially the 2019 champions repolished. Some of the players have grown. They bring back Hawkins. They bring back Shatori. Where do you see this team? What's your biggest question mark for them? And how can they answer that question mark?
It all starts and ends with Deladon. It just does. It sounds like she's looking good, feeling good, playing good, playing well. I know all my grammar people out there. It starts and ends with Deladon. I think you obviously have Ariel Atkins, who is phenomenal. You bring back Natasha Cloud. Alicia Clark, it sounds like she's getting there and she's getting some confidence and her ability to get back on that court. I mean, this Maisha Hines-Allen, I mean, she is an absolute force to be reckoned with, up-and-coming talent in this league. So I'm really excited to see Washington out there back on the court. It kind of feels like they were in like hibernation last year. It was just a really rough year of, just adversity. Now, I think it was you that brought it up. You were like, they're trying to run it back from, was it 2019? Which I think it's a little bit different, but obviously, and we've seen this type of Mystics force to be reckoned with, especially offensively. Remember that high-octane offense they were running a couple years ago? It was just insane. I think they are quite very possible doing it again. But for me, it's like, you're just kind of like the people in the middle. It's like, okay, we're just going to, in this tier, like, okay, we're a step behind, but you kind of need to wait and see what's going to happen. Would I be surprised if Washington goes on and wins the championship this year? Absolutely not. Based on this roster and health concerns pending, they definitely.
Well, I guess, Rachel, which would surprise you more? This team stays healthy all season, or they win the championship?
Probably right. This team stays healthy all season. And I hate that, but it's. That's just the thing. It's there's just so many unknowns right now. It could go either way. It could be really, really great, or it could be subpar, below average. It's just hard to say because of exactly that.
Yeah. And let's talk about Las Vegas Aces real quick. I mean, they're a team that I feel like they're going to test the Twitter finger coaches, the armchair coaches, right? Because, because for so long, the complaint about the Aces is they're not letting A'ja Wilson do her thing. Bill doesn't like to shoot threes. We need a new coach. We need a new style. They bring in Becky Hammon, a historic signing, a big signing, but there's so much question about what is her coaching style. What are we going to see from this team? And now, I mean, the pressure is on Becky and A'ja. The pressure is on Chelsea Gray. Like, the pressure is on. You can't use the Liz Cambage excuse anymore. You can't use the Bill Laimbeer excuse anymore. What does this team look like? We know that they were arguably the most talented basketball team of league history the past couple seasons. The real question is now, what is this team? And because we don't know, I can't put them in a top tier.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's the unknowns. Now, I do think that, I'm just looking down the list of the roster right now. You see some super talented, all-star level talented players who are playing the best basketball of their careers, who are now going to be able to, the game is going to be opened up, and hopefully they can play to the best of their abilities, i.e., A'ja Wilson's at her best when she can be the anchor of the offense and the ball can be thrown into her and she can throw the team on her back and she can go to work at the end of the game. She's not splitting spacing and dealing with things in the paint that might mix it up. The ability for Las Vegas to stretch the floor with Kelsey Plum and the way she's playing is scary. I love the idea, of Hammond talking about we're going to shoot more threes, we're going to be this high octane type of offense, and then have this anchor of Asia Wilson in the interior. Love it. It sounds more about what this team would naturally thrive in, right? Like all the things that are being talked about with it sounds like how this team should naturally be playing. Now, we have yet to see it. But then, you throw in, Chelsea Gray. I mean, the pieces are there. I would be Jackie Young too. I mean, there's an experienced team here, and this move to hire Becky was really to pass the baton and take this franchise to the next step, the next level. But it's just kind of the same thing we talked about before. Like, how is this team going to be chemistry wise, or those 6 inches between their ears, amongst themselves through the course of a season? I think they're setting it up to look really, really good. But again, it's just there's too many unknowns. We have to see it. We have to see it and kind of analyze it first.
Yeah, and then the last team that I have in this tier is the Lynx, and some people are going to say, and Rachel and I talked about this before we jumped on air, I guess is the term. Because
this was the one I got heat for. So maybe I got heat for.
Were people mad that where did you put him? You put him at like 5th or 6th, right?
I think I had him at like 4.
Okay, and were people happy or mad?
I got a little. I think a lot of people did not agree with that. Now I will say you changed my opinion.
That they feel like you should be higher or lower.
They should be lower. I don't know. At some point, I kind of had to just mute it because it was just a lot. But I originally, my first gut instinct was to kind of put Minnesota lower. But when you get to that 4 through 8. Even 4 through 9, it's like, what do you do? When you haven't physically seen these teams compete, where do you put these teams? And we'll briefly touch on the dangerous but not consistent ones. I mean, we have to talk about the Mercury in this show. I know you're going to hate me because we got to do it longer, but do we not talk about the Mercury? I think you swayed my opinion on Minnesota. Full disclosure, and we were talking about it before. Like, am I because you're from there, do you think them in a more highly regarded way? But I think, when it comes to Minnesota, you can never count Cheryl Reeve out, and there's something about the Sylvia Fowles retirement tour of this year that I really, really just want to hold on to. And I was really impressed with Minnesota and how they were able to, in some ways, overachieve last year. I think they've got some really good pieces. I think obviously not having Nafisa Collier in there hurts tremendously, but I like the addition of Angel Mccartry. She brings some veteran offensive kind of just star power that can give you something in short spurts. So, maybe Minnesota is a little bit high at 4, but history has shown us this is a franchise that is run by Cheryl Reeve and with Sylvia Fowles at the anchor. You can never count them out. They're going to find ways to win games. They're going to find ways to be in contention time and time again.
100%. I mean, with Minnesota, the interesting, confusing, concerning aspect, like you said, when it comes to Minnesota, especially this year, I really have to check myself. Am I being extra harsh because I'm from there? Am I being extra attentive because I'm from there? At the end of the day, like you said, you have the best center, arguably, in league history. You have the best coach, arguably, in league history. You have Angel Mccartry, who really wants to win a ring and has shown over the past few years, even coming back from injuries, she can still. I mean, obviously the assumption is she can bounce back like she did last time from the knee injury, and hopefully, have a productive season. The question mark for me is, it's the bookends. It's okay. After Syl, Dantas is still not 100. I've heard, is the last report I saw. So what's that going to look like? Because right now she's the only big on this team that can shoot. And then, are you going to be playing a lot of small ball with maybe putting Angel to the 4 and Dantas at the 5, or Syl at the 5, or there's going to be a lot of combinations. Then you got the question of the point guard. Obviously, Leisha Clarendon solves some things, but Crystal Dangerfield, are they going to keep Yvonne Turner? Are they going to keep Rachel Banham, who's a fan favorite? There's a lot of questions. Obviously, my opinion is that they're in a tough situation because of the Natalie Achonwa contract, but also if you just look at, I'm not in the conversations or discussions that happen in roster movement, in like salary negotiations. But if you ask me, if I look at Lasia Clarendon, Angel McCautry, and Sylvia Fowles contracts, that is 130, 90, and 200. I feel like I could have skimmed off enough that I would save 72K to save me some space for one more roster spot. We talked about this before. Obviously, Cheryl Reeve is much smarter when it comes to this stuff than I, but you have to wonder how much that Natalie Achonwa contract is really going to hurt them in their ability to foster a deeper roster, because Kayla McBride isn't coming for a little bit. Some other players, I know Crystal Dangerfield's not even in the country yet. So the early on in the season, having key players like that not there, yes, more of the players were there this camp than normal, but this is going to be a tough start for this Minnesota Lynx team. The question is, how do they weather the early storm? And then what do we see throughout the rest of the season? But I do think talent-wise, you have to put them in a top 6. All right, Rachel. Dangerous. Oh, yeah. Sorry,
I think the success of Minnesota, this is an opportunity for Kayla McBride, Ariel Powers, and Jessica Shepard to step up.
Yeah.
They all have to play well, but there's an opportunity for 2, if not all 3 of them, to elevate their play this year, which I personally believe is more than possible. I'm a huge fan of Shepard. I mean, I'm just like, this could be a really big summer for her in my mind. That's just kind of my opinion.
Yeah.
Those 3 players, I think that because Clarendon's a great fit with this roster. I think it's a phenomenal fit. We know what Fowles is going to bring. Those 3 players you're looking at, and I mean, you could throw Dantas in there too, because we all know. I mean, we saw a couple years ago what she's capable of bringing to this team. But those 3 players, have got to elevate their play and have a phenomenal year.
Yeah. It's as simple as that. I'm just going to run through the different tiers, and then we're going to touch on 2 more teams. Dangerous but not consistent. It's the Mercury, Sparks, Liberty, and Wings. Bottom of the barrel, Dream, and Fever. The 2 teams that I want to touch on briefly is the Mercury and the Sparks. Now, the Mercury, in my mind, you can't say they're a step behind. They lost their best player last year. They wouldn't make the run they made. Like, literally, Rachel, we talked about this. Everybody thought I was crazy when I picked the Mercury from early in the playoffs to go to the finals. Everyone was talking shit about me, but I was right, okay? Because Brittany Griner was playing MVP level out of her mind basketball. When she was doing that, it didn't matter what the rest of the team did. It covered up for Diana Taurasi's horrible Swiss cheese of defense. It covered up for Skylar Diggins-Smith just struggling through at different points during the postseason. And other players, obviously, Sophie Cunningham had a crazy good game. Bria Turner had a really good game. Like, there was other players who were doing important things. But at the end of the day, it really came down to Brittany Griner just putting the team on her back. Now, obviously, bringing Tina Charles is still a star-studded team, but Tina Charles is past her prime. She's ring chasing at this point. Hate it or love it, that's what it is. So my question for you is, like, I think I sent you a text message at one point while you were like writing the article, and we were just kind of chatting about it and spitballing. And I think I had like the Mercury a lot lower than even this. And you were like, wow, that's really low. And I was just like, well, if you don't have your best player by far, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I hate it. It pains me to, talk about this. I hate that this is even an issue that we're being discussed. I hate that she's not in the country. I hate that she's not at camp. Like, everything about it is just a terrible, terrible situation. But at the end of, here we are, the season starts in a week, and she's still there. So, that's where in my rankings, that was the reason. It starts and ends with Brittany Griner. I mean, literally playing as the best player in the world last year, and was playing the best basketball of her career. And without her on the floor, the imposing presence she brings offensively, defensively, you cannot replicate that. There's nobody else like her. It's just a completely different team, So, that is the factor here. Until Griner's in the States, this team is going to look very, very different. And other people they're going to have to play a different style. They're going to have to be different defensively. I hope she gets here soon and immediately, I mean, this team, if they're at full capacity, I think is loaded up. I love the addition of Diamond Shields to this team. I'm excited to see what she can bring to this team. But right now, I mean, you can't make up for not having Brittany Griner on the floor. It's just a different team. So you kind of have like Phoenix in the early seasons and how they're going to have to play versus, fingers crossed, hopefully Phoenix, when Griner is in the States and she is able to play with this team, then they're at full capacity and how they're actually designed to play.
Yeah, and then, but then again, we have a new coach there also, so a lot of question marks there. LA Sparks, I think, is an interesting one too. All I really need to say is, like, look, they, like, Derek Fisher put chips on.
How do we not have we need like a reality show in LA?
Oh yeah, no, that's not even a question. But no, I mean, the question is they have some hard choices to be made coming towards the end of camp. But like for the LA Sparks, it's just, Derek Fisher said, look, I'm not going to have a roster, like I'm not going to continue to be the face of a bad franchise. I'm going to put all my chips into the table, push it all forward. We're going to get as much talent as possible. We're going to run the gambit. This is either going to be a triumphant season of LA Sparks doing things we've never seen in the WNBA before, or this is going to be a dumpster fire. And no matter what, it's going to be great for content. So as someone who makes content on the WNBA, I'm excited for it. It'll make for highlight basketball no matter what. I'm excited. Any final thoughts on the LA Sparks?
No, I mean, I think that they had a phenomenal offseason. Phenomenal. You basically took care of every issue you had last year, which was the ability to score the basketball. Now it's a matter of like, okay, you've got all this superstar talent. How is it going to fit together? How does this team look on the floor? How is their chemistry? Because again, you're bringing in all these pieces, highly talented pieces, but you're going against other teams with superstar talent that have consistency behind it. So that's a tall task, but nonetheless, all eyes on LA, excited to see how this team fits.
Let me remind our listeners, tickpick.com/Winsidr for all your upcoming ticket purchases, WNBA, NFL, NBA, or any other event. Make sure to get it through there. If you're getting a t-shirt, breaking tea or homage, use their website /Winsidr, and have a great night. We'll be back.